Welcome to episode 14 of season 2 of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast. Your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. This week we will discuss the intersection between judgment, the NBA draft, and, that's right, the Quesorido, a Taco Bell food product, if you could call it food. Be patient, dear listener. There's a payoff. Speaking of patience, we discuss risk and great art. Can one be patient enough to take the types of risks to create great art? All in the context of episode 5 of the final season of Better Call Saul, a recap. Once again, thank you for all of the attention, for all of my listeners, and please, if you could, like, subscribe, promote, do the social media type things that the peoples do. I am grateful to you all. Let's go.
Act 1, the intersection of judgment, the NBA draft, and the Quesorido.
An important part of this podcast, an important part of my evolution as a person, is trying to be just a tad bit less judgmental. Maybe not a tad, maybe a lot less judgmental. I had a pretty high peak of judgmental. I have a lot of room to move to be less judgmental. The strange paradox in trying to be less judgmental is judging yourself for being so judgmental. And within that paradox, there's judging those that judge. I talked about this several times in the podcast last season, looking at those that judge others. When we are judged, when we feel like we're being judged, we immediately take a step back. We immediately start to evaluate our position. And we look at the criticism as if it were coming off of Mount Sinai written on stone tablets. We rarely, in the moment, actually look at those that are being critical and evaluate the totality of their opinions, of their criticisms, in order to weigh whether or not their judgment is even worth considering. Subconsciously, maybe even unconsciously, for years, I believe that I have been judging those that judge, and not by the things that they say, the criticisms that they make, these judgments. I'm looking at the totality of their opinions, of their criticisms, of their judgments, and I think my unconscious state, my subconscious perhaps, was aware that something was wrong. There's an absurdity to this. In my density, I couldn't quite put my finger on it. This person has no place to be casting aspersions, to be making judgments, in light of all the other thoughts, opinions, actions that they have taken, that have been memorialized in the universe now, which is so easy given that everything is out on social media. Point being, I don't have to care about what they think. They're not getting a discount. They're not getting any credit for maybe having an opinion here that's valid and an opinion there that's absurd. You say you really don't watch television that often, but The Bachelor and The Bachelorette are must-see TV? You're written off. And there you have it. One's natural instinct is to turn on them, to begin judging them. Your opinion here is valid, your opinion here is invalid. I'm going to listen to anything that you say, I'm going to discount everything that you say. I'm doing this while not consciously aware, yet what this is a mirror, right? This is a mirror of ourselves. We're seeing ourselves in these other people, and it's a reflection. And in that reflection, if we don't like what we see, we need to change how we are. At least that's what a lot of the literature, a lot of the practice, a lot of this spirituality that I've been exposing myself to, that's the challenge. That's the challenge being posed to you. That's the challenge being posed to me. You can change your perspective because you can't change the other person. It's all very high-minded, is it not? And I'm putting a lot of this into practice. But for the sake of this segment of the podcast, I'm not going to be doing that. I'm going to be putting that down. I'm going to be judging those that judge. And after reflecting on this piece, I see the separation. This is not a reflection of me. I feel separate and in many ways alone because I am a lone voice in the midst of a cacophony, a sea of opposition. This week, Nikola Jokic won the Most Valuable Player Award in the National Basketball Association, the best basketball player in the league for the year 2021-2022. Now, that is a debatable trophy. There are a number of other players that I think were worthy of the award. The fact of the matter is he won the award, and he won the award last year. Nikola Jokic, your two-time NBA Most Valuable Player in back-to-back years. Jokic, when drafted, was not a high prospect. He was not one of the prospects that was getting a lot of hype. There wasn't a television spot that was waiting to be queued up by a producer on ESPN when he was drafted. There wasn't a bunch of guys on a dais talking up his game and the hype and where he was going to be drafted. He was an afterthought. Jokic was so much an afterthought that not only was he drafted in the second round, but he was drafted so late in the second round that when that draft pick was made, the broadcast was actually in commercial. So instead of seeing the pick being made, seeing people on a dais talk about it, showing highlights of his game, he was the ultimate afterthought. His draft pick was made during a commercial. It just came up on a ticker below the commercial during the NBA draft broadcast. Now, dear listener, you may be thinking how I'm going to speak to judgments being made about players evaluated for draft prospects, where they go in the draft, the money that they're given, their ultimate success or failure, and how it's all a crapshoot. No, not at all. During the broadcast of the NBA draft where Jokic was drafted, the commercial that was playing during his pick was a Taco Bell commercial. The product in question, the product being promoted by Taco Bell during this advertisement, is a product called a Quesorido. It is a burrito then wrapped in what looks to be a filthy fake cheese covered tortilla, which ostensibly would be a quesadilla, then baked, I assume, but in the realm of Taco Bell, they baked nothing, microwaved, and then served piping hot to some unsuspecting dullard who would go and pay money to obtain this pig slop configured to present as human food. How, you might ask, dear listener, can I speak to this advertisement and the framing of this advertisement with relationship to Nikola Jokic's draft slot? How can I speak to this so specifically? Well, as I am wont to do now, promoting this very podcast, I am on the Twitter. No, I do not recall this from memory. It's the Twitter. On the Twitter, there are memorializations of the things that have happened over the course of human history. There was a post that was retweeted, and I hate to even use that terminology, but I'm on the platform, I'm speaking about the platform. There was a post that was retweeted by a friend of mine, and it had that very advertisement with the caption saying, the two-time MVP of the league was such an afterthought in the second round that there was a Taco Bell commercial playing when that actual pick was announced. I personally, when I read that tweet, reflected on what a gamble the draft actually is and how it's very difficult, although teams are spending millions and millions of dollars a year to analyze draft prospects. It's very difficult to pick whether or not the person that you're so interested in, the person that you think is going to be such a great player, whether or not they're actually going to turn out to be a great player. Are they the player that you think that they are? Does the pick warrant the money that you're going to pay them? You pick somebody in the first round, you're going to pay them a lot of money. You pick somebody in the second round, you're going to pay them significantly less money. Ah, the uncertainty of it all, the chaotic nature of our universe. And yet, I could not avoid, I was drawn into the comments being made about this post. And what were those comments? By the Twitterverse, by the user base, those that frequent the Twitter. Wow, Twitter user says, I could sure go for a quesarito. That quesarito is so good. I loved those quesaritos. Oh, I've had so many a night, savoring the quesarito. Let's talk about the quesarito, shall we? This is a filthy, disgusting looking, vomit and diarrhea producing product. This does not look appetizing at all. And I'm not talking about, oh, I saw somebody eating one. I'm speaking specifically about the advertisement that Taco Bell made, spending millions and millions of dollars, not only to shoot the product, but to make the product look as absolutely appetizing as they could. Then spending tens of millions of dollars in order to place that ad all around the country. This is a disgusting food product. This product appears to me as if it were served in, let's say, Xinjiang to the Uyghurs who are in those re-education camps. That would prompt a revolt. Pasty, chunky gruel, scooped out of a teacup with a wooden spoon. Yeah, they would go ahead and eat that. Serve them the quesarito. Pure, unadulterated anarchy. I mean, really, the only prison system that you could get away serving that crap is the U.S. prison system, and that's basically because they don't feed people in the U.S. prison system anymore. Those people are starving. They'll eat anything. And I want to focus for a minute on the fact that this food product, as dressed up as it could possibly be, being featured in this advertisement, looks like shit. It looks like eating shit. That, dear listener, is its best presentation. This is an Instagram corollary that we can all relate to now. You go out and you see all of these profiles on Instagram or Twitter, all of the photos of the little girls who are traveling all over the world to advertise products, all of the buff guys who are working out and trying to push supplements, trying to push some sort of exercise regimen, all of the smiling faces for whatever diet that they're eating, whatever shirts and products that they're wearing, the watches, the sunglasses. Have you ever seen any of these people actually taking these photos? I'll tell you a quick story. I was at the Desert Botanical Garden. This was probably a couple of years ago, at the Desert Botanical Garden in Scottsdale, actually technically in Phoenix. And there were two girls that were gallivanting about the place, and it was annoying. Gallivanting in the true 1910s, 1920s sense of the word. They were all over the place, and they were in these ridiculous poses, and they were doing all of these silly things. And I thought, who are these two fucktards? What is this nonsense? And then it struck me. This is an Instagram influencer. Both of these girls were beautiful. They were both gorgeous. And here they are in these goofy poses, saying and doing these stupid things in reality. Yet the picture, the video clip, I'm sure translated perfectly to the Instagram medium. I'm sure that there were 1 million likes and 1 billion follows and many a product bestowed upon either one of those girls for what they were able to produce and publish on their Instagram account. In reality, fucktards. I think we all understand as much as a population of people, no matter where we live, what color we are, what age we are, religion. We all understand this is a false reality. Social media is fake, and we almost expect as much. Strangely, though, it's a fake reality. It's an illusion that we all want to be true. And we also want it to be true that we will let it influence our decisions. Here I'm watching two girls not enjoy the reality that's in front of them, that they're actually experiencing in the present moment, in order to create a false reality and then to promote that false reality for other people that want to live in the false reality. You may be sitting there, dear listener, and asking, how the hell does that correlate? What is the tie? Where is the analogy to a filthy, disgusting Taco Bell product being played during the NBA draft and it being the actual focus of attention of the Twitter user in light of the reality that is the whole NBA draft, all sports drafts, life in general, is very much a crapshoot. Oh, I clicked on some of the profiles gushing over the Quesorido. And yes, dear listener, it was exactly as you would have expected it would be. There are some very judgmental people who, on a medium like Twitter, can cast aspersions, can make very, very cynical comments, can be critical of their fellow man, and yet turn around and profusely, and I mean profusely, praise the Quesorido. Now, it looks filthy in the advertisement. That's its dressed up, that's its professional best. It looks disgusting. Can you imagine what it looks like when you actually go into a Taco Bell and buy one? Can you imagine the product that you actually get when you unfold that wrapper? The smell, the taste. Can you imagine how you feel as a consumer halfway through that thing, knowing that Taco Bell, all of the ingredients are the lowest of the low, the lowest grade that you can get in, if you could even call it beef, if you could even call it chicken, whatever their vegetables are, you know that those things came from probably halfway around the world, have had every type of preservative placed on them in order to keep them looking fresh. I would imagine that I personally, eating that thing, would feel shame halfway through eating it. What happened to me? What mistakes have I made in my life that I ended up at a Taco Bell eating a Quesorido? If you can eat an entire Quesorido and feel satiated, and satiated such that you want to go back and eat another one, look to your left. That's a heroin addict. Look to your right. That's a methamphetamine addict. You can still look down and see the people that smoke cigarettes, but you're sitting right next to somebody who's using heroin, and you're sitting right next to somebody who's using meth. You're all killing yourselves ever so slowly. Now, you may think you're feeling joy, just like the heroin addict feels the joy, just like the meth addict feels the joy, because you're getting these dopamine hits, but you're just fooling your brain. You are living an illusion. See how it all ties together, dear listener? You are living an illusion. The food is the same thing as the drug is to the drug addict. Give me those dopamine hits. And is the Instagram influencer that much different? The rush that one feels getting all of the attention, the likes, the follows? Let me escape into the false reality so that I can get what I want, because I don't trust that I can get that out of reality. Right there, you've heard me be very judgmental of those that would eat the Quesorido. I have no doubt that there's many a listener, I know you're out there, who are saying, hey asshole, we want to be happy. Should we be subject to judgment and criticism for wanting a little happiness? Well, I'm wrestling with whether or not I should be ashamed of being this judgmental, and here's the reason why. The heroin addict does not walk around and say, you know what? I'm really, really excited about more heroin. And the way that heroin affects me, you don't hear the meth addict cracking wise about yellow teeth and jaundice. And what you certainly don't hear is either one of the members of those two groups judging, being critical, having the audacity to put out their cynicism about the world and the way that it works on the Twitter. If you find yourself in a Taco Bell taking your money in order to buy a Quesorido, you're part of the problem. If you find yourself in that position and you properly feel the shame, you properly feel the regret, I mean, you're out until 2:30 in the morning and you're purchasing a Quesorido with a 0.238 blood alcohol level, sure, you've had a great night, but in a way, you're having a terrible night. Your body will communicate as much to you, certainly at about 9:30 the next morning. Whether it's a healthy way to do it, One of the things that I've developed since I've gone on this spiritual journey, since I've had this spiritual awakening, is simply to look at the body of thought, the body of opinion of the people that we're listening to most often in judgment, in cynicism, in criticism. And when you look at the totality, you think to yourself, why am I listening to this fucking idiot? My God, this is a Quesorido consumer. The challenge is then to do what? Is to say, I don't have to be judged by other people. I don't have to judge myself. I don't have to abide by other people's judgments. I can live my life judgment-free. And because all of those things are true, I can live and let live. I can abide the Quesorido consumer. I will not judge those that judge. As this close to now 20-minute segment may indicate to you, dear listener, I'm having a real problem letting go of judging others in the totality of what they do and say. I feel more free that I'm not bound by the judgment of others. Not that I ever was, but the fact is, when you really look at some of the decisions that you've made over the course of your life, it's hard to say, I was not influenced by the judgment of others, by the judgment of the masses. Maybe it's a product of getting older, becoming more independent, more comfortable with oneself. But certainly, when you look at the fact that there are so many people out there proffering so many different types of judgments, so many criticisms, so much cynicism, it's easy to get put on your back foot and feel like you need to defend yourself. Yet all you need to do is ask a couple of questions, and in the universe of social media, maybe scroll down to a couple of other feeds, a couple of other posts, and my God, that judgment that you're reacting to, my God, you may be reacting to the judgment of a Quesorido consumer.
Act 2, The Risk in Great Art, and a recap of Episode 5 of Better Call Saul.
I don't know if everyone makes the same assumption. Art in and of itself is subjective, so it's hard to make generalizations. I have made the assumption that there's always great risk in great art. Great artists, whatever their medium, have a vision, and often that vision is far outside the vision of their contemporaries, artists, the people that actually pay for art, the patrons, and most particularly the public at large. This is why great art is so rare. There is so much risk involved. How much risk is an artist willing to take? How long are they willing to be a starving artist? And are they going to compromise their personal vision for their patrons, those that are actually paying for their art supplies, perhaps even their living expenses? How long can one hold out, keeping one's vision intact? Better Call Saul Episode 5 was one of those episodes that Vince Gilligan has in this canon we call Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, an episode that is specifically set up to trigger the end game in later episodes. You don't see this in a lot of television programs because there isn't a lot of vision in television programs about where the characters, where the plot, where everything is going to wrap up. If you have a vision, if you have it all written out, even sketched out from the beginning, you can set up the characters in very intricate ways. You can set up the plots in very intricate ways that a set of writers going from season to season without any clear vision about where a show is going to go, how the characters are going to develop within the culmination of the plot, you don't have that synergy. You don't have that vision. Before I talk about the particulars of what happened in Episode 5 of Better Call Saul, how the episode was clearly a bridge to much deeper, much more intricate plot development, I actually want to talk about George Lucas and Star Wars. When I was scripting out what I was going to say about Episode 5, it came through me strongly that Vince Gilligan is one of the rare artists, and yes, television writing, television producing, television directing, television itself is an art form. Vince Gilligan is one of the rare artists that actually had an entire vision of what he wanted for Breaking Bad. He knew how he wanted to start, he had an idea of how it was going to develop, but he knew how he wanted it to end. Similarly, George Lucas wrote out all 3 of the Star Wars movies. He had all 3 scripts. He knew exactly what he wanted to do in what he was calling episodes 4, 5, and 6 of the Star Wars saga. Now all you have to do is get it made, is actually get it produced. Vince Gilligan, for his part, when trying to sell Breaking Bad, had very few suitors, and the only one that bit, AMC, bought the show for but 1 season. And this is something that I think, looking at Better Call Saul, looking at the development of the Breaking Bad universe in this Better Call Saul prequel, it's hard to remember how raw, how unpolished those first 3, 4, 5 episodes of Breaking Bad were in the inaugural season. Think about what Vince Gilligan was going through shooting that show. He knew where he wanted to go. He had to sell that show well enough in the 1 season that he knew he had in order to get AMC to buy additional seasons. Think about what that does to the artist. Think about what that does to the art. You have a limited time frame. You have to make it splashy. You have to draw in the viewers. You have to have the critical acclaim well enough that you're going to get a second season. If you can't put that all together in the first season, you're not going to get to make a second. Looking in retrospect, in hindsight, we know that the last 5 episodes of the first season of Breaking Bad went off like gangbusters, had very good ratings for a show that was A, far down the heralded list of new shows, B, on a cable network, basic cable network, C, that didn't get a ton of advertising to promote the new show, and D, again, looking at how raw and unpolished it was at times, probably didn't have a huge budget. Gilligan was able to take certain liberties, but probably not as many as he wanted, in order to get a second and a third season of Breaking Bad. You are compromising your vision with needing the patrons, needing the monetary support to see that vision come to its culmination, to its fruition. And this is a good bridge to the George Lucas story and Star Wars and risk in great art. George Lucas had made an independent film, American Graffiti. He directed that film. He wrote that film. It did relatively well at the box office. To be clear, it did relatively well at the box office for an independent film. With that return, and that's a very important element of the George Lucas story, of the Star Wars story, and the Vince Gilligan Breaking Bad Better Call Saul story, with that return, with the return on investment that George Lucas was able to then bring to another studio, he could sell Star Wars. I am a risk worth taking. I am an accomplished, independent filmmaker, independent screenwriter. I am a risk worth taking. Lucas was able to sell Star Wars, but only the first episode, or episode 4 in the way he had set forth the chronology of the trilogy. He got a studio to buy 1 script to make 1 movie. Based on the accomplishment that he had in American Graffiti, he was going to turn that into his dream, make this Star Wars movie. Then the success of that Star Wars movie would obviously excite those studio executives, and they'd buy episodes 5 and 6, and the trilogy would be made. As writer and director, George Lucas got his pile of money. He went to Morocco to film the first Star Wars. Lucas immediately went over budget. He had tons and tons of film. He had this massive idea about what he wanted to do. Well, you don't have to be a movie studio executive. You don't have to know how to read profit and losses statements. If you've got an independent filmmaker that's only got 1 independent film under their belt, you give them a bunch of money, they go off to a foreign country and immediately go over budget and immediately go over schedule, you've got yourself a problem. The studio eventually cuts off his budget. The studio eventually says, we need a product. You've gone so far over schedule. We need something that we can actually put our hands to, and you need to come back to the United States and put it together. Lucas limps back and does as much. One of my favorite stories about George Lucas is he finally puts together the Star Wars movie that he wanted. Now, granted, it wasn't exactly as he wanted. He still wanted to shoot more. He still wanted to go into further detail about the story. But as writer, as director, as editor, he puts together a Star Wars movie and gives it to the studio and also screens it for many of his friends. Now, as an aside to the story, George Lucas, an independent up-and-coming filmmaker, he was in a genre of up-and-coming independent filmmakers that was probably, in the history of Hollywood, second to none. The names that strike me are Stanley Kubrick and Brian De Palma. If you don't know who Stanley Kubrick is and Brian De Palma is, you don't know as much about movies as you think you do. The studio hated what George Lucas had done. Even his colleagues, contemporaries, and acclaimed friends told him, this is a bad movie. What you have done is not good. It is confusing, it is long, it has too many jump cuts, it's just not good. The studio, in a fit of frustration, basically takes the film from Lucas, realizes we've probably lost all of the money that we've invested in this kid. We've lost all of the money we've invested in this project. We've got to salvage this and put something together that we can actually put out into theaters just to try and recoup losses. For the sake of this piece and for the sake of my point, I'm not going to go into any further detail, but additional editors were brought in. They were given the film and they were told, edit this to make it at least comprehensible, that it can at least be something that people will understand over the course of 2 hours sitting in a movie theater. That is exactly what these editors did. And in the final cut of the movie, which George Lucas was not a huge fan of, the studio, after hemming and hawing, said, yes, we will actually put this movie out. This movie will appear in theaters. George Lucas said, okay, what are you going to do to promote the movie? And again, every one of the studio executives, scarred by the first showing that they had of what George Lucas had done, still thinking that this was just a salvaged piece of shit, said, we're not spending dime one. Every dollar that we've spent is a loss leader. We're only putting this movie out to try to recoup losses. This is simply how deeply we're going to go into the red, having engaged in this project with you. And Lucas said, you know what I'll do then? I'll spend every last dollar that I have to promote this movie. I'll pay for the marketing materials. I'll pay for all of the posters, all of the ads. I'll do it myself. You, studio, will assign the rights to the promotion of the film to me. I'm spending my own money. All of those licensing rights are mine. The studio, seeing very little risk in doing this, because this movie was going to be a flop, and that was another loss leader having to promote it, well, they signed over the rights. Movie huge success. George Lucas owns the rights, and that's why every single thing that could be monetized with Star Wars was monetized. Action figures and toys, lunchboxes, mugs, t-shirts, posters, you name it, George Lucas was going to slap a Star Wars logo on it. He needed that money because as soon as he saw the dollars roll in, he wasn't greedy. He knew, I'm not going to let a studio corrupt my vision for the next 2 Star Wars movies. They will be made. I will make them the way that I want to make them. And I won't have a studio breathing down my neck because now I have the financial resources to do this. Risk, reward. Risk, reward. George Lucas took great risks. I do find it ironic, though, that one of the reasons why he had to take such great risks with regard to his own finances and promoting the movie was because he's a bad director. We'll leave that conversation to another day. He had the foresight and maybe just the balls to spend every last dollar on his dream. When it paid off, George Lucas had the liberty to do whatever he wanted. He could take whatever risk he wanted. He could spend any amount of money on that risk. In that same vein, once Breaking Bad hit, once it paid off for AMC, Vince Gilligan was allowed to take risks with what he was doing in television, presenting a television show as if it were a movie. Think about it, dear listener. As a moviegoer, there are several elements of every movie that just work in service to set up other parts of the movie, later parts of the movie, whether or not it's character development or plot arcs or the final or the culmination of the movie. There are parts of movies that are literally filling in the gaps that need to be filled in order for the movie to come to fruition, to a satisfying fruition. You don't see that frequently in television. Television is always looking at ratings. It's always looking at what's next. It's very much like a publicly traded corporation. There is no long-term vision. It's only, can we make our quarterly profit and loss? Can we make the money that we basically promised our shareholders and the market to make in this one quarter? That's how television episodes are shot. That's how television producers think. That's how television writers think. That's how television directors think. Vince Gilligan took the risks. He had a long-term vision, and it is paid off by way of what? Viewership. Now the advertisers come. Now the networks come. Now the directors come. That brings me to episode 5 of Better Call Saul. It is an episode that works completely in service of the long-term goal of the culmination of the show. There wasn't a tying up of a plot line or a storyline. You didn't see much in the way of a character arc for Jimmy or Kim or Howard or Gus or Lalo. The episode served to advance the ultimate conclusion of the series. And boy, did it do so. Let's start with the intersection of Gus and Lalo and the under construction meth laboratory under the laundry facility. The episode opens with a very curious laboratory setting, if you will, and it turns out that over the course of the montage, you are getting a slide scale memorialized in some sort of plastic epoxy, and it's not until you get the inscription that you realize this has something to do with A, engineering, and B, Germans. So, dear listener, your mind should have immediately gone to the deceased Werner, and somehow this was going to tie to his involvement in the excavation of the soon-to-be meth lab under the laundry. This is one of the things that I love about Vince Gilligan, that I loved about Breaking Bad, that I love about Better Call Saul. You know there's going to be a payoff. You just have to be patient. You are being asked to be patient, to pay close attention to detail, and to be patient. That, dear listener, that is a risk. That is a risk that an artist is taking. That is a risk that an artist is taking in particular in the medium of television. To ask of a viewer to be patient and to be detail-oriented. Two things that most of us aren't in our everyday lives, and certainly we aren't in a television program, most of us watching television as a form of escape in the first place. Why the hell do you want to escape into the things that you're not good at in your everyday life? Yet Gilligan has a way of putting these things together, of crafting this where you want to be very detail-oriented. You want to have to solve that puzzle. Not that you're going to be able to solve it in the future. You want to be detail-oriented so you have all the pieces in front of you so that you can try and solve it later. Knowing that you're going to need all the pieces, you are patient, waiting for those pieces to present to you. that Gilligan is able to do it, that the directors, that the actors, they're all able to do it in a way that you keep coming back week after week. And it's clearly not just me that it appeals to, given the success of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. The details. One of the details that I love about the character of Gus is the fact that he's so fastidious, that everything has to be perfect. In the universe of the show, although it's not really ever explored, he likely has a phobia or a mania concerning neatness, concerning cleanliness. This mania, this phobia, manifests very comically when you find Gus in this alternate or substitute home, scratching the grout with a toothbrush, making sure that it's spotless in what is a shower that he would likely never enter into under any other circumstance than his life being under threat. But the payoff is the fact that while walking around with the ankle holster, he's uncomfortable. This is outside of his norm, and when he's uncomfortable, he gets anxious. And he's anxious 24/7 as this ankle holster weighs him down. The payoff, if you could call it that, is Gus going through his mind thinking, where is Lalo going to strike? What is he going to try to strike at to hurt me? Is it going to be me personally? Very likely not. Is it going to be Pollos Hermanos? Very likely not. What am I doing all of this in service of? The methamphetamine business. To strike at the heart of that, you strike at the lab. The under construction lab. Now, he doesn't know, Gus doesn't know where Lalo is, and Gus knows that Lalo doesn't know where the lab is. So what's Lalo likely doing? He's looking for the lab. So Gus takes that gun that is so inconveniencing his person, so inconveniencing him personally, and he puts it where he thinks he's going to need it. He stashes it at the lab, on top of the wheel of the crane. In his mind, he knows that's where Lalo's going, and he's going to meet him there. Cue Lalo's appearance in Germany. I love the scene between Lalo and Werner's wife, the way the tension built, the way this budding romance between the two of them also built, and then you see him break into the home to find what? The culmination being that slide ruler featured in the montage at the beginning of the episode. With one key omission, there was something inscripted. There was some sort of impression on the bottom of that slide ruler encapsulated in that plastic epoxy that we were not privy to. You briefly notice as much when Lalo picks it up and looks under. Something was inscribed there or something was imprinted there that gave him the information that he needed, such that it's clear he's probably leaving Germany now. Pieces of a puzzle patiently assembled so that we can put them together later. Then we have the Jimmy, Howard, Kim dynamic. Jimmy and Kim still working on getting the Sunshine case settled so Jimmy can get his 7-figure payout, and using Howard as the proxy, if not the fall man, the catalyst to actually get this accomplished. I could go on for another 20 minutes about all the dynamics, but one thing stood out to me, and it's the scene after Howard beats down Jimmy, although it was made to great effect that Jimmy had some competitive spirit, that there was a back and forth between them. You see throughout the episode the efforts that Jimmy and Kim go through in order to set up their plan. And the one wrinkle is Jimmy being invited to this boxing ring to actually fight Howard. Now, I'm sure both of them suspected that Howard would do something to get back at Jimmy once he realized that Jimmy was behind all of these odd coincidences that he kept experiencing. Clearly, they hadn't foreseen that Howard would do something to that effect. Jimmy, in bed with Kim after having taken a pretty severe beating, says, "Why did I do that? Why did I let him suck me in?" In that moment, it struck me that this is the Jimmy McGill that we see all throughout Breaking Bad. This is the person that does things they don't quite understand why they're doing them, and then they look back at the consequences and think, why did I do that? There's regret, there's remorse, there's shame, there's guilt. Kim, for her part, listening to this, is unflinching. She's unfazed. You did it for the reasons that you did it, and now it's over. In that moment, there is this overt, if not brief, head nod between conspirators that what they wanted is actually moving forward. I understood this implication to mean that the private detective that Howard hired, who is now going to begin following Jimmy, is all part of Jimmy and Kim's plan. That not only did they anticipate that this was a move that Howard would make, but that their ultimate plan cannot go off, cannot actually be realized unless Howard has a private detective following Jimmy. Does this mean that now Kim is going to be the prime mover for many of the things that are going to occur in order for this Sunshine case to get settled, in order for whatever degradation, whatever disgrace that's going to befall Howard to take place? I believe so. It reinforces my belief, it strengthens my belief that Kim still exists in the universe of Breaking Bad to some capacity, to some extent, and is not only in that universe, but is still the bedrock, the foundation, the prime mover for the character that is Saul Goodman. Saul Goodman is the amalgam of both Jimmy McGill and Kim Wexler. Jimmy McGill the mouth, Kim Wexler the brains and the balls. This is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast.